Welcome back. If you are here, it means you want to understand people who fear emotional closeness instead of simply reacting to their behavior. That already puts you ahead of most people. Today, we are going far beyond the surface to explore the hidden patterns that shape these relationships and explain why their actions often seem confusing. Many people assume that someone who keeps emotional distance experiences love and relationships the same way everyone else does. That assumption leads to endless misunderstandings. The truth is very different. These individuals do not lack emotions. In many cases, they feel everything deeply. The difference is that life has taught them to connect closeness with emotional discomfort, disappointment, pressure, or even the fear of losing themselves. Because of those early experiences, they learn to depend on themselves above everyone else. Protecting their inner world becomes their safest strategy. Unlike people who naturally open up quickly, they move with great caution. They do not allow just anyone into their emotional life. Every interaction is quietly observed. Every conversation is carefully measured. Every relationship is tested before they allow it to become deeper. That is why small actions that seem ordinary to most people can carry enormous meaning when they come from someone who normally guards their emotions. When they remember little details about you, make space for you in their daily life, or consistently return, even after needing distance, those moments are rarely random. They often mean you have reached a place very few people have ever reached. Most people miss this completely because they are looking only for dramatic gestures instead of quiet consistency. Stay with me because the next part changes everything. One of the biggest things people fail to understand is that emotional attachment does not usually feel exciting at first for someone who fears intimacy. Instead, it often feels uncomfortable. The closer they become to another person, the more they are forced to face something they have spent years trying to avoid. They begin realizing they are emotionally invested. They start recognizing that another person's presence actually matters to them. And because their sense of safety has always depended on independence, those feelings create a powerful conflict inside them. One part wants to move closer, another part immediately becomes afraid. From the outside, this can easily look like confusion, uncertainty, or a sudden loss of interest. But very often, it means the opposite. It means the relationship has become more important than they know how to handle. For many people with this pattern, depending on another person has always felt dangerous. Somewhere in their past, trusting someone may have ended with disappointment, rejection, or emotional pain. So when genuine feelings begin growing, they do not experience only happiness. They also experience fear because opening their heart means risking being hurt again. Yet something remarkable often happens. Even while feeling uncomfortable, they do not always walk away. They continue coming back. They stay involved. They reconnect after moments of distance. That matters far more than most people realize. When someone truly feels nothing, there is usually no struggle. They simply move on without looking back. The hesitation, the mixed signals, the moments of stepping forward and then pulling away often appear because the connection actually matters. Their protective system becomes active precisely because the relationship has become emotionally significant. What happens next may surprise you, because understanding this changes the way you interpret almost everything they do. One of the most common mistakes people make is believing that more pressure will create more closeness. They think they need to prove themselves, explain themselves, give more, or push harder until the walls finally come down. But that approach usually creates the opposite result. Someone who fears intimacy is rarely drawn toward emotional intensity. Instead, they respond much better to calm consistency, patience, emotional steadiness, and the feeling that connection is available without being forced. When they continue returning, continue making time for you, and continue struggling with feelings they normally avoid, those actions often reveal that the relationship has become meaningful in a way that is unusual for them. That does not guarantee everything will become easy, but it does suggest the connection matters. Another experience that confuses many people happens when everything seems to be going well. You share meaningful conversations, you feel emotionally close, then suddenly they become distant again. It is easy to assume you did something wrong or that none of the closeness was real, but very often that distance is not about rejecting you. It is about regulating emotions they do not yet know how to manage. Because independence has always been their emotional safety zone, increasing closeness can accidentally activate old protective responses. Their mind begins interpreting intimacy as a possible threat, even when nothing is actually wrong. That creates a confusing pattern. The stronger the emotional bond becomes, the stronger the temporary urge to step back may become as well. This is why moments of withdrawal often happen immediately after meaningful conversations, vulnerable experiences, or times when the relationship suddenly feels deeper than before. They are not always moving away because the connection is weak. Sometimes they move away because the connection has become stronger than they expected, and they need time to process feelings that once seemed impossible. The important thing is to watch the overall pattern, rather than reacting to one isolated moment. Real growth is usually measured over months, not days. Consistent effort, honest communication, gradual emotional openness, and increasing trust reveal much more than temporary periods of distance ever could. The healthiest relationships are built by two people who continue choosing each other while also respecting each other's emotional pace. When you understand that, you stop chasing every moment of withdrawal and start recognizing the deeper story unfolding beneath the surface. That deeper understanding is often what transforms confusion into clarity and creates space for a stronger, healthier connection to grow. From the outside, this behavior can feel confusing and even contradictory. One moment, everything seems close and connected, and the next moment, they need distance. But from their perspective, stepping back is often their way of restoring emotional balance. At the center of this pattern is a deep fear of becoming too dependent on another person. Depending on someone creates vulnerability, and vulnerability brings uncertainty. For someone who learned early in life that staying in control was the safest way to avoid pain, uncertainty can feel deeply unsettling. Pulling back becomes a way to regain that feeling of control. Understanding this changes the entire picture. Their distance is often a coping strategy rather than a form of rejection or punishment. Unfortunately, many people respond by chasing harder, asking for constant reassurance, or increasing emotional pressure. Although those reactions usually come from love and fear, they often create the opposite effect. They strengthen the belief that closeness will eventually become overwhelming. What creates real emotional safety is something much steadier. It is giving space without disappearing. It is remaining patient without becoming bitter. It is staying emotionally available without constantly chasing after answers. That quiet balance communicates something powerful. It shows that love does not have to take away freedom. The deeper truth is that not everyone experiences love as comfort from the beginning. For some people, love awakens fear long before it feels safe. Growth is not always a straight path. Sometimes it includes pauses, setbacks, and moments of stepping back before moving forward again. The important difference is whether they disappear completely or continue finding small ways to stay connected while working through their emotions. Stay with me because this changes everything. When someone is truly finished with a relationship, their actions usually become very clear over time. But when fear is the real issue, the pattern often looks different. You may notice hesitation instead of certainty, distance followed by another return, silence followed by renewed communication. If someone repeatedly comes back, continues investing time, and keeps trying despite their fears, it often means there is an unresolved battle taking place inside them. One part wants closeness, while another part still believes distance is safer. That internal conflict can continue until those two sides slowly learn to exist together. This is why your attention needs to shift away from trying to stop them from pulling back. A much healthier question is this: how can you remain emotionally steady when they do? The stronger your own emotional foundation becomes, the less their fear controls the direction of the relationship. People who fear closeness are rarely attracted to emotional chaos or constant pressure. They feel much safer around calm, emotionally balanced people who remain centered even when life feels uncertain. Often the biggest turning point happens when you stop measuring your own worth by someone else's moments of distance. Real confidence does not immediately assume the worst. It does not rush to fill every silence with worry. It stays grounded. It allows uncertainty without turning that uncertainty into self-doubt. So the next time someone creates distance, instead of asking yourself, "What did I do wrong?" try asking a different question. Ask yourself, what emotions might this connection be bringing up for them? Because people rarely move away from things that mean nothing. More often, they step back from experiences that challenge old fears and push them beyond familiar emotional limits. Most people miss this completely because they see only the distance instead of the struggle happening beneath it. What happens next may surprise you. As you begin understanding this cycle of closeness and withdrawal, another important pattern becomes easier to recognize. Their behavior is usually not random. It follows emotional habits that were formed over many years. People who protect themselves through emotional distance rarely approach relationships with dramatic displays of affection or constant pursuit. Instead, they often observe quietly. They take their time. They notice small details. Many people misunderstand this and assume they are playing games, but that is not always what is happening. More often, they are trying to answer one important question: is this relationship emotionally safe? Every pause, every quiet moment, every delayed reply, and every period of distance becomes another opportunity for them to gather information. without even realizing it, their nervous system is asking questions such as, if I need space, how will this person respond? Will they panic? Will they pressure me? Will they lose themselves trying to keep me close? Or will they stay emotionally steady? Emotional safety, for them, is not created through intensity. In fact, too much intensity often feels threatening. What feels safe is consistency, stability, patience, and predictability. That is why they are naturally drawn toward people who remain calm during uncertainty, people who do not flood the relationship with fear, people who do not require endless reassurance to feel secure. That kind of emotional presence quietly communicates something powerful. I can love deeply without losing myself. At the heart of all of this is another important truth. Independence has always been deeply connected to their sense of safety because at some point in life, relying on themselves felt like the only reliable option. When they meet someone who is equally grounded, someone who has their own purpose, healthy boundaries, and emotional stability, that confidence feels reassuring instead of threatening. Here is something many people never notice. The more someone like this begins to care, the more carefully they tend to observe. If a relationship means very little to them, there is no reason to keep watching, no reason to return, and no reason to invest emotional energy. They simply move on. Observation becomes important only when the relationship truly matters. That is why they may step away for a while before reconnecting. Communication may become quieter before growing stronger again. They may appear distant while still remaining quietly present in your life. They are not always waiting to see if you will chase after them. More often, they are noticing whether you remain connected to yourself, even while the relationship feels uncertain. And this is where many people unknowingly lose balance. They respond to distance by giving more, explaining more, sacrificing more, and forgetting their own emotional needs. Yet the healthiest response is often the opposite. Remain grounded. Continue building your own life. Protect your own peace while leaving room for healthy connection. That steady confidence creates the kind of emotional environment where trust has the best chance to grow naturally over time. When uncertainty appears, many people instinctively react by giving even more of themselves. They lower their boundaries, ignore their own needs, and work harder and harder to hold the relationship together. When communication becomes quiet, they send more messages. When distance appears, they invest even more energy, hoping that extra effort will bring the other person back. But from the perspective of someone who fears emotional closeness, that response often feels very different than intended. Instead of feeling comforting, it can feel overwhelming. Instead of creating safety, it can create pressure. What builds trust is not endless sacrifice. It is self-respect. It is emotional stability. It is showing through your actions that you care deeply about the relationship while also remaining connected to yourself. That quiet confidence speaks directly to one of their deepest fears. They are often drawn toward people who are warm without becoming demanding, supportive without becoming emotionally dependent, caring without becoming controlling. When they experience that kind of connection, something begins changing inside them. Their constant need to observe slowly becomes less intense. Their periods of distance often become shorter. Their returns become steadier. But there is something important you must never forget. Being observed is not the same as being chosen. Earning someone's trust through patience and consistency does not automatically mean they are ready for a committed relationship. It may show genuine interest. It may reveal emotional significance. But readiness requires something more. At some point, careful observation must become active participation. Uncertainty must become honest communication. Distance must slowly become consistent movement toward each other. The goal is never to spend your entire life proving that you are safe enough. The goal is building a relationship where both people contribute, trust, and grow together. Stay with me because this next idea changes everything. Most importantly, never lose yourself while trying to fit inside someone else's fears. The moment you begin abandoning your own needs simply to gain another person's approval, you fail the most important relationship you will ever have, the one you have with yourself. People who struggle with emotional closeness rarely respect someone who constantly sacrifices their own identity. What they often admire instead is authenticity. They respect emotional strength, personal integrity, and the ability to remain true to yourself, even when the relationship feels uncertain. Real confidence does not beg to be accepted. It stands quietly on its own. So when you notice someone spending more time observing than pursuing, or evaluating more than expressing, try to understand what may be happening underneath the surface. Very often they are asking themselves one silent question: if I become close to this person, will I lose my freedom? The strongest answer you can give is not pressure, persuasion, or trying to prove your value. The strongest answer is your own calm presence, grounded in genuine self-worth. Because the moment you stop trying to pass someone else's unspoken test and begin living according to your own values, you naturally become someone others feel drawn toward. That quiet confidence creates a different kind of attraction. It does not chase, it does not force, it simply exists. Most people miss this completely because they spend all their energy trying to control another person's reactions instead of strengthening their own emotional foundation. What happens next may surprise you. As the relationship grows, another deeper truth often begins revealing itself. When someone repeatedly comes close, steps back, returns again, and continues struggling with mixed emotions, the issue often becomes much bigger than the relationship alone. It begins touching their sense of identity. When you truly enter the emotional world of someone who has spent years protecting themselves, you are not only offering love or connection, you are quietly challenging the story they have believed about themselves for a very long time. People who rely on emotional distance often do not only avoid other people, they also avoid parts of themselves that once felt too painful to face, their vulnerability, their longing for connection, their emotional depth. Over time, independence stops being just a habit. It becomes part of who they believe they are. They begin repeating thoughts like, I don't really need anyone, I'm better by myself, I don't become emotionally attached. Eventually, those beliefs become the foundation of their identity. Then someone enters their life who gently challenges every one of those assumptions, not by demanding closeness, not by forcing emotional conversations, simply by showing up with steady kindness and genuine presence. That creates a powerful inner conflict because your existence begins contradicting a story they have depended on for years. If being close to you feels peaceful, meaningful, and emotionally safe, then the beliefs protecting them no longer feel completely true. That is where the struggle begins. Not because love itself is dangerous, but because changing an old identity is one of the hardest things any person can do. Letting someone into their life means questioning the very defenses that once helped them survive. Even when those defenses are no longer needed, releasing them can feel frightening. Growth often feels this way. Before people gain something healthier, they first feel like they are losing something familiar. Many hold tightly to old versions of themselves simply because those versions feel known. People who protect themselves through emotional distance experience this too. The independent, emotionally guarded version of themselves once kept them safe. Letting go of that identity can feel like stepping into unfamiliar territory. That is why someone may admire you while still hesitating to move closer. Your calm confidence quietly proves that closeness does not automatically remove freedom, that vulnerability does not always end in pain, and that healthy connection does not erase individuality. To them, you become more than a romantic possibility. You become evidence that another way of living might actually exist. And that realization naturally creates inattention. Their actions may still ask for space, yet their heart continues moving toward what feels meaningful. Understanding that difference helps you respond with patience instead of panic, confidence instead of fear, and self-respect instead of self-abandonment. That is where healthier relationships begin, not by changing another person, but by remaining deeply connected to who you are while allowing genuine connection to develop naturally over time. Working through that inner conflict takes time, honesty, and a willingness to face emotions that have often been buried for years. Not everyone is prepared to do that immediately. This is where many people unintentionally make one of the biggest mistakes. They begin making themselves smaller. They stop expressing what they truly feel. They soften their personality, hide parts of themselves, and try to take up less emotional space so the other person feels more comfortable. But changing yourself simply to protect someone else's comfort is not love. It is self-betrayal. Your responsibility is not to reshape who you are so another person can avoid their own growth. Your responsibility is to remain authentic and allow others to decide whether they are willing to meet you where you stand. Someone who fears emotional closeness does not need another person to rescue them from change. They need the freedom to choose change for themselves. Real growth cannot be forced by love, patience, or sacrifice alone. It begins with awareness, personal responsibility, and a genuine desire to become healthier. Sometimes, even when a connection is meaningful, people still choose what feels familiar instead of what could help them grow. That decision is not a reflection of your value. It reflects where they are on their own path. If your presence makes someone question old beliefs about themselves, it means you have touched something meaningful inside them. But being deeply important to someone never means you are responsible for waiting forever while they decide whether they are ready. A relationship that slowly asks you to silence your voice, limit your growth, or hide parts of yourself will eventually cost you pieces of your own identity. Stay with me because the next part may completely change the way you understand love itself. As you begin understanding these relationship patterns more deeply, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. If you are searching only for words to prove how someone feels, you may be looking in the wrong place. Many people who struggle with emotional closeness do not express love through speeches or dramatic declarations. Their first language is often behavior. Speaking openly about emotions can feel risky because putting feelings into words removes the emotional distance that has always made them feel safe. Instead, they often communicate through consistent actions. They may not constantly tell you how much they care, but they quietly show up when you truly need them. They may never give long emotional speeches, but they offer practical support, solve problems, remember small details, and pay attention to the things that matter most to you. They notice what causes you stress. They remember what brings you comfort. They quietly make room for you in their daily life, even if they never explain why. Many learned early that expressing emotions invited disappointment or pain, so they connected love with being dependable instead. Somewhere along the way, they formed the belief that being useful was safer than being emotionally exposed. As a result, they often express affection through reliability rather than words. They may never say they miss you often, but they make sure they are there when you need them. They may not reveal every feeling inside their heart, but they respect your boundaries, protect your time, and consistently include you in their life. Their love is often measured more by repeated actions than beautiful promises. Most people overlook these quiet signals because they are searching for louder ones. What happens next may surprise you. Understanding this, however, should never mean ignoring your own emotional needs. Compassion is valuable, but it should never require sacrificing yourself. The real question is not simply whether someone cares. The important question is whether their actions remain consistent and continue moving the relationship forward. Healthy love, even when expressed quietly, still grows over time. As trust becomes stronger, emotional openness usually becomes a little easier. Progress may happen slowly, but genuine growth creates movement. Real change is built through emotional safety, not pressure. At the same time, being important to someone does not mean accepting endless uncertainty. It does not mean waiting forever for clarity, and it certainly does not require giving away your self-respect simply to protect hope. People who fear emotional closeness are often naturally drawn toward individuals who are emotionally grounded, self-aware, and secure within themselves. But the moment you begin abandoning your own identity just to preserve the relationship, the dynamic often changes. If they begin feeling responsible for your emotional stability or believe you need them in order to feel complete, that pressure can activate old fears instead of creating greater closeness. Constantly asking for reassurance, giving far more than you receive, or staying silent about unmet needs rarely strengthens the connection. More often, it quietly pushes it further away. This is why self-respect is essential. Choosing yourself is not the same as giving up on the relationship.